I walked into the closing office, holding a folder that felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. My sister Vanessa was already sitting at the long wooden table, leaning back in her chair with a look of victory on her face. She smiled at me like she had already won something. She had no idea what I brought with me. 2 weeks earlier, we buried our mother. I was still waking up every day expecting her voice in the kitchen. My grief was raw, and I was trying to take things slow. Vanessa, on the other hand, moved fast, faster than anyone grieving should. She claimed she wanted to sell Mom's house to split the money fair. That was her favorite line. She said it to the realtor. She said it to our cousins. And she said it to me every time I answered her calls. Now here we were, sitting in an office with papers laid out across the table. A check for $180,000 was supposed to be printed after we signed. Vanessa kept tapping the table with her nails, like she was already counting the money in her head. She even wore a new blazer to look professional, although the tag was still hanging from the inside sleeve. The closing officer walked in with a polite smile. He sat across from us and said, "Thank you both for coming. Once we confirm ownership and signatures, we can finalize the sale." Vanessa leaned forward as if she could already hear the check printing. I looked at her, then at the officer, and placed my folder on the table. My hands were steady. My voice was calm, even though my heart was shaking. I opened the folder and slid a document across the table. "I can't sign anything today," I said. "This is Mom's updated will. She changed everything last year." Vanessa froze. Her smile disappeared. She grabbed the paper so fast she almost tore it. Her eyes scanned the page. Her face went pale. She whispered, "What is this?" I answered, "It's Mom's 2023 will. She notarized it at the credit union. The house belongs to me." The room went silent. The closing officer reached for the will, read the notarization stamp, and nodded slowly. "This document is valid. It overrides any previous version. We cannot continue with the sale." Vanessa pushed her chair back and stood up. Her voice shook with anger. "You hid this. You planned this. Mom would never do this to me." But she was wrong. Mom knew exactly what she was doing. She knew who had taken care of her. She knew who paid her bills on the months she fell behind. She knew who drove her to appointments when she could barely walk. She knew who showed up. The moment I set that will on the table, everything changed. Vanessa's plans fell apart right there in that room. Her voice cracked as she argued with the officer, then with me, then with herself. But the truth was written in black ink, and nothing could erase it. And that was the moment my story truly began. My name is Hannah Reeves, and for most of my life, I have been the quiet one in the family, the one who kept things running, the one who helped when no one else did, and the one who never made noise about it. My sister Vanessa was the opposite. She took up all the space in every room, every conversation, and every situation. People noticed her first and listened to her loudest. I was used to it. Our mother, Marilyn, was the anchor of our family. She was gentle but firm, organized but warm, and she believed in preparing for the future long before it arrived. She worked at the local library for years and always said that paperwork was a form of protection. "A signature can save a family from 1,000 arguments," she once told me while organizing a box of old documents. For the last year of her life, Mom's health declined faster than any of us expected. I was the one who drove her to appointments every Tuesday and Friday. I picked up her medicine, cooked her meals, and stayed with her on the nights she was afraid to sleep alone. She never complained, but I could see the fear in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Vanessa visited only when she needed a loan, or when she had something dramatic to tell Mom about her ex-husband, Gavin. Mom knew the difference. She never said it to hurt Vanessa, but she understood who she could rely on. One night, about a year before she passed, Mom sat with me at the kitchen table. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were serious. "Hannah, I want you to keep the house. You're the one who takes care of it. Vanessa won't want the responsibility." I didn't know what to say. I remember just holding her hand and nodding. She smiled and whispered, "I'll handle the paperwork." I did not know she meant she would update her will so soon. After Mom passed, the house felt hollow. The smell of her favorite candles still lingered in the air. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand, her coat still hung by the door. I walked through every room slowly, feeling every memory press into me. But Vanessa was on a different path. She started pushing to sell the house before the funeral flowers even wilted. She said things like, "This is what Mom would want," or "We need to be fair," or "You're not going to keep the house all to yourself." I tried to explain we needed to grieve first. She didn't care. She wanted fast money, fast solutions, and fast decisions. Then she went behind my back and contacted a realtor. She set up meetings without telling me. She even told relatives that the house was already in the process of being sold. I felt trapped between grief and pressure. I wanted to protect Mom's home, but I didn't want to start a war with my sister. I wondered if I should just give in to avoid drama, but my mother had already made the decision for me. I just had to be brave enough to follow it. If you're here so far, don't forget to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. As the days passed after Mom's funeral, the quiet sadness in the house felt heavier each morning. But Vanessa was moving faster than I had ever seen her move in her life, and every step she took pulled me into a conflict I never asked for. It started with small comments that slowly grew into pressure. First, she would call and ask if I had thought about the house yet, speaking like someone checking on an order, not a family home. Then she began sending me listings from real estate websites and texting phrases like, "We could get a good amount if we sell fast," or "You know Mom wanted us to be fair with each other." She said that line almost every day, as if repeating it could make it true. I tried to remind her that Mom had only passed 2 weeks ago and that we needed time to breathe, but Vanessa didn't let up. She began visiting the house without telling me, walking through each room with a notebook, writing down things she thought needed painting or replacing before the sale. One afternoon, I came home from work and saw her car in the driveway. I walked inside and found her in Mom's bedroom with the closet door open, pointing at Mom's clothes and saying, "All of this needs to be cleared so the realtor can take photos." My chest tightened as I said, "Vanessa, these are Mom's things. We haven't even gone through them." She rolled her eyes and answered, "You're too emotional. I'm trying to help. This is what adults do when someone dies." The way she said it felt like a jab, as if grief made me childish. In reality, she was the one acting without respect. Within days, she had contacted a realtor friend named Megan, a woman with a loud voice and a forced smile who talked to me as if everything had already been decided. Megan said, "Your sister told me you both want a fast sale. I can have the house listed by Friday." I looked at Vanessa, confused, and asked, "You told her that without talking to me?" Vanessa shrugged and said, "I figured you'd agree. We need to be smart." That was the moment I realized she was not going to stop. She had built an entire plan without me, and she expected me to fall in line. The more I hesitated, the harsher she became. She started speaking to relatives behind my back, claiming I was dragging my feet and making everything harder. Cousins I barely talked to were suddenly messaging me, asking why I was being difficult. Vanessa was creating a story where she was the reasonable sister, and I was the selfish one. The pressure tightened until it felt like a rope around my chest. I couldn't sleep, and I kept replaying every argument in my head. My grief felt pushed aside and replaced with guilt I didn't deserve. Then, everything changed the day I was sorting through Mom's desk drawers. I opened the bottom drawer and saw a blue envelope with my name written on it in my mother's handwriting. My heart pounded as I held it. Inside the envelope was a neatly folded letter and a notarized copy of Mom's 2023 updated will. The words were clear and simple. She left the house to me alone. She wrote that I had cared for her, supported her, and kept the home steady during her hardest years. She said she trusted me to protect it. I sat there holding the letter, my hands shaking, feeling both honored and overwhelmed. I knew I had to show this to someone who understood legally what it meant. I didn't want to argue with Vanessa. I didn't want to fight. I wanted guidance. I took the will to the credit union where Mom had it notarized. The woman at the front desk looked at the document, smiled softly, and said she remembered Mom. She confirmed the will was valid and properly filed. She even said, "Your mother was clear about her wishes. She wanted everything done right. Her words gave me strength, but they also lit the fuse of what would become a storm. Meanwhile, Vanessa was spiraling deeper into her own plans. She told me she already picked out new furniture with the money she expected to receive. She talked nonstop about leaving her small apartment and moving into a better place. She said, "This is my chance to start fresh, Hannah. Don't ruin it." Every time she spoke, her voice was full of excitement, but underneath it, I heard fear. She was counting on this money more than she admitted, and I was holding the one truth that could stop everything. I kept the will close to me and decided I would reveal it only when I had no other choice. Vanessa had crossed every line, and the day of the closing was coming fast. For the first time in my life, I realized we were not two sisters trying to handle a shared loss. We were standing on opposite sides of a decision that would change us forever. The night before the closing felt like the longest night of my life, because I knew that by the next afternoon, everything would come to a breaking point. And I had to decide whether I would stay silent to avoid conflict or finally stand up for what was right. I kept Mom's updated will and her handwritten letter on the kitchen table, reading the words again and again until the ink felt burned into my memory. She had trusted me to protect the home she built, and I understood that her decision was not about favoritism. It was about responsibility. But every time I pictured Vanessa's face, I felt a knot in my stomach. We had fought before, but never like this, and the thought of telling her the truth made my chest tighten. I could already hear the yelling, the accusations, and the things she would throw at me that she could never take back. But this was no longer about avoiding a fight. It was about protecting my mother's last wish. Early the next morning, before anyone else was awake, I drove to the credit union where the will was notarized. The building was quiet. The kind of quiet that felt respectful. I walked to the front desk and showed the will to the same woman who had confirmed its validity earlier that week. She looked at me with a calm, steady expression and said, "Your mother was very clear. This is the updated document. Do not let anyone pressure you into ignoring it." Hearing those words from someone who witnessed the signing made something inside me settle. I was no longer confused or scared. I was certain. I thanked her, walked out to my car, and drove straight to a small attorney's office across town. The attorney was a middle-aged man with kind eyes who listened carefully as I explained the situation. He looked through both wills and pointed to the notarized stamps, saying, "This one overrides the older version. Legally, the house is yours. When you bring this to the closing, they will have to stop everything." His voice was firm, almost protective. He told me exactly what to say, what not to say, and how to stay calm even if things got emotional. I left the office feeling stronger than I had felt since Mom passed away. I drove home, made myself tea, and sat in Mom's favorite chair. Her scent still lingered faintly in the fabric, and I closed my eyes, imagining her sitting beside me. I whispered, "I'll take care of it, Mom. I promise." The peace I felt lasted only a few minutes, because my phone began buzzing nonstop. Vanessa was sending message after message, each one more excited than the last. "Wear something nice tomorrow. This is the easiest money we'll ever make. Megan said the buyers are ready to sign everything. Don't be late. We need to look united." Her confidence was so strong it almost felt like a performance. She needed the money, and she needed the win. She needed to believe she was finally getting ahead in life. I understood her hope, but I also knew she had created this situation. She pushed the sale. She rushed the process. She ignored grief, honesty, and respect, and she never expected the truth to stand in her way. That evening, I packed the documents into a simple black folder. Will, notarization, letter, proof. I placed the folder on my nightstand and tried to sleep, but my mind kept replaying memories of Mom, the way she always told me to stay strong, the way she believed in doing things the right way even when it was hard. Her voice gave me the courage that my own heart struggled to find. When morning finally arrived, I dressed simply and drove to the closing office early. The air smelled like fresh coffee and paper. The receptionist looked up and smiled politely, then guided me to a small conference room. I chose a seat on the far end of the table, not wanting to sit beside Vanessa when she arrived. A few minutes later, I heard her voice in the hallway, loud and cheerful, talking about how she already had plans for her half. When she walked in and saw me sitting alone, she laughed lightly and said, "I told you not to come so early. You look stressed. Relax. We're about to start our new lives." She set her purse down, adjusted her new blazer, and kept smiling, completely unaware that everything she believed was about to fall apart. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply placed my hand on the folder in front of me and waited for the closing officer to walk in. For the first time, I wasn't scared of the confrontation. I wasn't scared of Vanessa's reactions. I wasn't scared of the storm that was coming. I was finally standing in the place my mother trusted me to stand. And I was ready. When the closing officer finally entered the room carrying a stack of forms and a calm professional smile, the air in the conference room shifted, and I knew this was the moment everything would break open, the moment when the truth would cut through every lie, assumption, and plan my sister had built. He greeted us, sat down, and began explaining the sale price, the signatures needed, and how quickly the funds would be released. Vanessa leaned forward with a bright, excited expression, nodding at every sentence, as if she had waited for this moment her entire life. She even whispered, "This is it, Hannah, our fresh start." Her voice was full of a happiness I had not heard from her in years, but it was built on something that didn't belong to her, something she had tried to take because she believed I would stay silent. As the officer turned the contract to face us, handing me a pen, Vanessa tapped the table and said, "Go ahead, sign. We're almost done." Her confidence was so strong that the officer even smiled at her enthusiasm. I looked at the pen, then at the contract, then slowly pushed the papers back toward the middle of the table. I opened the black folder I had brought with me and placed the updated 2023 will on the table with a steady hand. My voice didn't shake. "I can't sign this. Mom updated her will last year at the credit union. She left the house to me." The room stopped moving. The officer paused mid-breath. Vanessa's smile fell instantly, replaced by confusion. She reached across the table, snatched the will, and held it up as if her eyes could force the words to change. "What is this? This isn't the will. The will said we split everything." I kept my gaze steady. "That was the old will. Mom replaced it." Vanessa shook her head fast, her voice rising. No, she didn't. She would never do this. You're lying." The officer reached for the document gently and read through it with the focus of someone who knew the weight of what he held. When he reached the notarization stamp, he nodded slowly and said, "This is a valid will, signed, witnessed, and properly filed. I'm sorry, but with this document, the sale cannot continue." That sentence was the official end of her plan. Vanessa's face twisted with anger, shock, and something almost like betrayal. She slammed her hand on the table and said, "You manipulated her. You took advantage of her when she was sick." Her voice cracked as she said it, and the pain behind her eyes made it clear she was not just angry. She was desperate. "Mom loved us both," I said, "but she trusted me to take care of the house. You weren't around. You didn't help her. You didn't even try to understand what she was going through." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were the kind that come from losing something you already believed was yours. She turned to the officer and the realtor, searching for someone to back her up, but they both stayed quiet. She pointed at me with a shaking hand. "You're doing this to punish me. You think you're better than me." I took a deep breath and answered, "I'm doing this because it was Mom's wish, not mine." Vanessa grabbed her purse, muttering angrily under her breath, and stormed out of the room. Megan, the realtor, looked uncomfortable, apologized to the officer, and hurried after her. The door swung closed with a sharp sound that echoed in the small conference room. The officer turned to me and said gently, "Take your time. When you're ready, I can file the cancellation paperwork." I nodded, but didn't move for a moment. I sat there, letting the weight of what just happened settle in my chest. I knew this moment would change my relationship with Vanessa in a way we might never fix. But I also knew my mother had trusted me with something important, something she believed I could protect. When I finally stepped out of the building, the cold air hit my face, and for the first time since Mom passed, I felt like I had done exactly what she needed me to do. Vanessa's world collapsed quickly after that. The furniture she ordered on credit was denied at delivery when her cards declined. The apartment she planned to move into fell through when she realized she had no down payment. Her landlord refused to renew her lease. With nowhere else to go, she ended up moving back in with her ex-husband, Gavin, the same man she swore she'd never speak to again. Meanwhile, I went back to the house Mom loved, opened the windows to let in the fresh air, and felt her presence in every room. The home was still mine, but more importantly, her trust was still alive inside these walls. In the weeks after the failed closing, the house grew quiet again, but it was a peaceful quiet, not the sharp, pressured silence I felt when Vanessa was racing to sell everything as fast as she could. I spent those first few mornings walking through the rooms slowly, touching the picture frames, opening windows, and letting the fresh air move through the hallways the way Mom used to every spring. The sunlight settled softly on the living room floor, and for the first time since she passed, I felt like the house was breathing again. It no longer felt like an object waiting to be priced or photographed. It felt like a home returning to itself. I fixed small things around the house the way Mom used to show me. I changed the batteries in the smoke detectors, tightened the loose kitchen drawer, and watered the plants. Mom kept by the window. Every task felt like a conversation with her, a reminder that love isn't measured in money, but in the quiet things we care for when no one is watching. Meanwhile, Vanessa's life began to unravel in ways I never celebrated, but also couldn't control. She stopped calling entirely, which was both a relief and a sting. News about her reached me through relatives. She had maxed out several credit cards expecting her half of the house money. She tried to cancel furniture she had ordered, but the payments were already processed. She planned to move into a nicer apartment, but without the money she assumed she would get from the sale, she couldn't afford the deposit. Her landlord refused to renew her lease because she had been late on rent for months. With nowhere to go, Vanessa ended up moving back in with her ex-husband, Gavin. Relatives said she cried for days and blamed me for everything. At first, I felt guilt pressing on me like a heavy blanket. No matter how justified I was, a part of me still wondered if I should have softened the blow or prepared her earlier. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered Mom's letter. I remembered the nights I helped her up the stairs, the mornings I drove her to appointments, the calls Vanessa ignored, and the weight of responsibility my mother trusted me with. Protecting the house wasn't about punishing my sister. It was about honoring a woman who depended on me when she had no one else to lean on. Months later, Vanessa finally reached out with a short message. It was not an apology, not fully, but it carried a different tone. She wrote, "I thought money would fix everything. It didn't. I don't know what to do with my life anymore." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure whether to reply. I cared about her, even if she didn't see it, but I also needed boundaries, something Mom tried to teach me. I wrote back, "I want you to find stability, but I can't be responsible for fixing everything. I hope you understand." She didn't reply, but I felt lighter after sending it. I realized I could love my sister and still protect myself from her chaos. Grief taught me that love without boundaries becomes a burden, and responsibility without honesty becomes resentment. Over time, the house became a place of healing. I painted the walls in soft colors Mom always loved, but never had the strength to do herself. I planted flowers in the front yard, imagining her standing at the door, saying they made the house look cheerful. I invited her closest friends over for coffee, and they shared stories about her laughter, her stubborn spirit, and the pride she had in her daughters, even when life pulled us in opposite directions. One of her friends hugged me and said, "Your mother trusted you more than anyone. She knew you would protect what mattered." That sentence stayed with me. It made the long months of conflict, guilt, fear, and tension feel purposeful. It reminded me that sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone in the middle of the storm until the wind settles. I also learned that grief doesn't end in a moment, but fades slowly, like shadows during sunset. The house no longer felt heavy. It felt like a gift, a responsibility, a piece of her love wrapped in brick and wood and memory. And as the months passed, I realized I had found my own strength, a strength I never knew I had until life pushed me to use it. In the end, the biggest lesson was simple. You cannot control how people act when money is involved or when grief exposes who they really are. But you can choose to honor what is right, protect the people who believed in you, and walk forward even when your heart shakes. This house was my mother's final message to me, a message of trust, a message of faith, a message that said, you did enough, you were enough, and now this home is yours to protect. And I did.